All right, we're going to go ahead and get started because I know some of you have appointments you need to get to earlier. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Amber Candela. I'm the colloquium chair for the MESA organization here at Georgia. It's our student association. If you're not a member, you should be. And one of my jobs is bringing in colloquium speakers. And this semester, one of the people we brought in is Dr. Jansen, who most of you in here have read her book, her co-authored book, Motivation Matters and Interest Counts. And so one of the things we wanted to do when she came in was have her give more of a practitioner-based talk at the level of pre-service and in-service teachers. And so Dr. Jansen teaches at Delaware. She's on sabbatical right now, but she normally teaches methods classes. And she taught middle school for 3 years in Mesa, Arizona. So please help me welcome her.
Thanks, Amber. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for taking your time to come to this talk today. The title is Checking In with Our Math Learners, Questioning Our Assumptions. I wrote a book with a colleague about motivation and engagement, and so sometimes I feel extra pressure to be extra motivating and engaging myself. So we'll see. Most of the talk today will be actually not me talking. It will be you watching a video and then commenting on what you notice in the video after I give a little overview. So I'm going to talk only for a tiny bit of time about what I mean by motivation and engagement and give us some examples. And then we'll spend some time thinking about how to think about our own students, how to think about our own students' motivation and engagement using this video as an example of that. So this is the book I wrote. I'm that person on the bottom. So if anyone's ever read any words out of that, thank you. It's always nice to read write something people actually read, so I appreciate that. So what is motivation and engagement? Engagement is really what we do. Whether it's good or bad or not depends on what we want to get out of the situation. And sometimes other people judge our engagement as good or bad because they might want us to get something out of the situation, and that might not be the same thing. You might not want the same thing out of the situation that maybe a teacher wants you to get out of the situation, for instance. So motivation is why we do it. So a motivation is a motive, that's redundant, but more of an intention, a wish, or a drive to engage in a specific activity. So I don't have a belief that some people are motivated and some people are not. It's why we want to do what we're doing. Everybody has a reason for why they're doing what they're doing. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes you think about it later and ascribe a reason to it, but any of that, that's your motivation. So it's a temporary state of being. It's not a personality trait in a person. And it's for a specific activity. So I don't really think about people as motivated to do math or motivated to learn. I think about motivated to finish working on a problem, or motivated to show up to class, or motivated to talk to Amber rather than give this talk, or something like that. It's a specific activity. And then engagement is your behavior in that activity. So I just want to give you that overview of my definitions. And thinking about what motivates us. So when I write about motivation for teachers, I don't ever say, this is what you should do to motivate your students. I don't know your students. I don't even live in Georgia. I don't know your school district. I don't know the community that your students live in. So I have no right to give you advice to tell you how to motivate your kids necessarily. But what I can do is tell you some perspectives of how people think about motivation, what people think motivates them, and then you can think about if that resonates with your students or not, or yourself or not, and then make decisions based on what you know about your context. So I want to give you one perspective of how we can think about motivation. And it's just one of many I could talk about, and I'm not here really to lecture that much today, but I just want to give you one example. So some people think that we're motivated by 3 ideas whenever we engage in behavior: relatedness, autonomy, and competence. And this idea is called self-determination theory. So in any moment, we're motivated by any of these 3 things, perhaps all of them, at the same time. So self-determination theory. You can read more about that, but I'm going to unpack that a little bit, just as one example for a way to think about motivation and what motivates us. So we might seek, in one situation, the idea that we want to be recognized as competent, we want to feel in control of the situation, and we want to feel like we have positive relationships with the people that we're around. So everybody always wants to feel capable. No one wants to feel not smart. People want to be recognized for being capable, but in an authentic way, about something specific that you're generally good at. And we want to have a sense of control over what we're doing, and we want it to be meaningful and interesting, and we want to feel emotionally safe and valued as individuals. So I'm just showing you this as one example of a set of lenses that you can think about when you think about your students. If they seem really involved and engaged, it might be because they're meeting their need to feel capable, or it might be because they want to feel more valued as individuals, or it might be both at the same time. Or they might be really involved because the task is really interesting to them. Some combination of those. Notice how it's not necessarily one of these, it could be multiple at the same time. So this is about as much as I'm going to lecture, and we're going to see a video in a second. So one thing about the book I wrote is that ways of thinking about motivation and engagement can provide insights for thinking about our students, our learners, and that was just one perspective I wanted to offer, and the book offers more. But I think more importantly, another way to think about what motivates our learners is to engage in inquiry, to learn from them what they think and how they interpret their classroom experience. And that's what the video is going to be about. So I think it's important all the time to check in with our learners and check in with what's going on with them, because we might be wrong. So if we don't check in with them, we would never know if we're wrong. So if we check in with our students and hear their perspectives, we might be surprised by what we learn from them. And if students feel heard, then they feel valued by their teachers, more connected to their classroom experiences, which could lead to stronger engagement with math. So just by checking in with somebody and asking them what they think about what's going on in class could help them feel more connected to your classroom in the first place. Wow, that person cares about what I think at all. So let me give you a story, and then we'll finally get to the video in a little bit. I teach both content and pedagogy courses for future elementary teachers. So this is a story about me teaching a content class for teachers. It's a class about fractions and operations, proportional reasoning. I show up one day to class. I ask my students to get out a homework assignment, and then we'll talk about it. They take out the homework assignment, and most of it is blank across the entire room. And I tried to control my reaction, because my initial reaction was to get really frustrated. My initial reaction was, they didn't even try. What are they doing? They didn't put forth any effort. What's going on? What's wrong? What's wrong? And I thought, okay, I have to check that. I have to check that initial frustration, right? So I said, all right, my assumption is they didn't even try. Maybe my assumption is wrong. So I said, okay, I noticed that we're not really ready to talk about the problem yet. Let's take some time working in your small groups and talk about the problem together, and then we'll regroup as a class. So I went around and I visited each group, and I was asking them questions. And they had a lot to say about the problem, actually. So it turned out that they had thought quite a lot about the task, and the amount of mathematical thinking that they had put into it just wasn't represented in writing on the paper. So if I hadn't checked in with them, I would have been wrong. I would have assumed they didn't try. But they had put mental energy into it. I just couldn't see it, right? And then I also learned that I hadn't provided enough scaffolds for them to access the task. And I learned about how they were thinking about it, and I could ask them some different questions. Oh, that's what you meant? And then they were able to make more progress on the task. So I learned that it was really about me not setting up the problem for them in a way that they could do it. So if I hadn't checked in with them, I would have missed two important things, right? So all of the time, we have to make assumptions about people in order to interact with them. But every once in a while, it helps us as teachers to check ourselves and to give our students some credit so we can learn from them, yeah? So we're going to watch a video of a classroom. This teacher's named Kathy Humphreys. Have you ever watched a video of someone named Kathy Humphreys before? Some people yes, some people no. So let me tell you a little bit about Kathy Humphreys. So in these videos, she teaches 7th grade, and she teaches 7th grade in California, and this is from an orange book that says Connecting Mathematical Ideas. This is not a video that a lot of people often watch from this set of videos, so I like to share it. So in this classroom, she's leading a whole class discussion. And she tends to be really good at getting middle school students to share their ideas in class and talk a lot about their solutions for a long time and connect the ideas and bring them to a great mathematical point. But in this video, there's a moment where she calls on the students to share their thinking, and the discussion kind of falls flat. And so she tries to problem solve that with her students for a little while. And so I'm going to give you some opportunity to watch this video and to think about what assumptions she might have held about her students, and then what she learned to problematize that assumption. So I have 2 pieces of paper to get some help passing out. And while my friends are passing out some papers, I'll set up the video. You're getting 2 pieces of paper here. One is a transcript, and another is a set of reflection questions that I want you to think about during the video. If we don't have enough for everyone, if you could share, that would be great. But I'll go over the questions a little bit. And you should feel free to write on the blue paper as we watch the video. It's a way to structure your thinking as you watch the video. And the transcript will help you follow along with it. This is an overview of what's going to be on the blue paper. I'm going to ask you, what assumptions do the teachers appear to hold about students' participation? And what did the students share with her that challenged those assumptions? And you're going to learn other things about what her students think about participating, and any surprises. So do we have enough papers for folks?
I did miss you. Honestly, I was kind of genuine.
And I know that other people have some other obligations and might not be able to stay for the whole time, so I know it's not rude if you need to leave, I get it. So does anyone not have the blue sheet? The blue sheet has these questions on it, and it's things for you to think about during the video. So as you're watching the video, if you feel like you have an answer to one of these questions, go ahead and jot it down so we can talk about it after the video. And while you're watching the video, the yellow packet is the transcript. Okay, welcome to Kathy's class.
Important question. Really, the only important question on the homework last night was C. How are the dimensions of each box related to the dimensions of the faces? That's really the important question. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the dimensions of the pretend box. And what I'd like you to do is, at your table, I'd like you to come up with the dimensions of the faces and how you know. And what I'm going to have you do is, I'm going to have you have a group reporter. So the person that's the group reporter is sitting in the position that Ray is. So Ray, Brittany, Randy, Amy, Jordan, Yvette, and Crystal. So I would like you for your group to come up with the dimensions of the faces of this rectangular prism and explain how you know. All right.
So the fact that she said she's going to have a group reporter is important. Do you know what she means by that? Group reporter? Like just one person is going to report on behalf of the group. That ends up being important. Just flagging that.
Right. I'm rolling my die, and I come up with 7, which is this table right here. So Randy, tell us what you got and why. Wait. I like the way a lot of people turn to see me. I'm going to agree with Randy's table. Okay, now Randy, can you explain how you knew that? Do you need the overhand one? Not really, okay. Can you explain how you... So Randy, talk to me. How come does your group help you because you're reporting from group? Okay, so is it that you group didn't explain why, or? It's really hard. How many people really hate reporters in class?
You get that this is an awkward moment? Okay. Just checking. She says, how many of you hate reporting to the class? So this is going to be, the rest of the video is discussing reporting to the class and what that feels like and if we're comfortable with that or not and why.
Okay, well, you did a really good job reporting so far. How many of you hate reporting to the class? Really? I remember my friend Carol Dickinson in 11th grade. Our teacher made us memorize a poem. And we had to stand up in front of the class, and it was like 20% of our grade. We had to say our memorized poem in class. And I'll never forget this. I mean, it's been so long. I remember Carol standing up there. And she got so scared that she was white, and she finally just couldn't do her poem. She just went, sat down. She didn't even care if she got an F on it because it was just too scary. So, all year long we've been having talking to the class. So, what's hard about it? This is May, and I'd like to know, for myself as a teacher, I'd like to know why it's hard and what I can do as a teacher to make it easier. I mean, you don't have trouble talking to the class. Why do you think it's hard?
Because you might not understand what I'm really talking about.
I agree with that reason, maybe it's really hard. Other ideas about why it's hard. I really care about this. Exactly?
Because you do wrong. Some kids are scared of being wrong.
How many are scared of being wrong in front of class? How many are not scared of being wrong in front of class? That's interesting. What other reasons for not wanting to report?
I forgot to say, as you're noticing some of the things that students are talking about, if you're not inspired by the questions in the blue paper, you can also think about if you're noticing anything related to competence, autonomy, and relatedness and what the students are saying too. So that's another issue to think about. You can think about the teacher's assumptions and what she's learning about the students, but you can also think if the students are revealing anything about competence, autonomy, and relatedness. So whatever inspires you.
Like Artie said, that you being because a reporter not knowing what you're talking about at all
It's really scary.
Yeah.
Alright.
And not having enough time to figure out what they're talking about.
So and then Christine, you want to answer that?
Well, I like taking the class as just from that's not my group. Because I know the person is going to be aren't they something wrong? And they're going to be like, no, it's not right.
Oh, I see.
You don't exactly get what they're saying.
Oh, I see. So what can I do as a teacher to help it be? Okay, so let me talk about why I think it's important. When you talk in your small group, you get a certain amount of ideas, but everybody might not get to hear that. And so I want all the students in the class to get the benefit of your thinking, no matter where you are. And I think it's really important that you also gain the skill to talk to people, because that's a life skill. So what can I as a teacher do to make it easier for you? If I think it's really important and you really hate it, what can we do? I'm really serious about this. Help me out here. Okay, nobody's helping me out, so Sarah, help me out.
Well, maybe for the people who don't want to speak for their group, you can rephrase your question to make it more like you're speaking for your group, but you're also stating your own. You're stating the opinion that you got out of the group.
So, in other words, I thought it was making it easier when you reported for your group, and what I'm hearing is it doesn't make it easier when you're reporting for your group. It makes it harder. You're kidding, I didn't realize that. Why is it harder? I don't get it. Brittany, why? Tell me why.
I think it's better when it's just I think it's better when you're putting your group. because I know more used to it.
That's what I was thinking. Exactly.
I think that's what makes it harder. You have to put 4 people's opinions in a couple sentences.
Alicia.
And then if you like back in with them, if you don't agree, like before it's time to report, then you hear nothing about that. You're like, hey, we thought this would happen to somebody else. This would happen to that will get reported.
Like you're talking to yourself.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you might also get somebody else's opinion wrong.
Oh, so there's more responsibility when you're reporting here. Like what? And then what about popsicle sticks then?
No.
Talk to me about popsicle sticks.
Popsicle sticks. Oh.
And I remember that one time I remember we were going to pick my name, and I had no idea what we were talking about, and she totally completely embarrassed me in front of the whole class.
Let me tell you why some people think popsicle sticks is a really good idea. If you believe as a teacher that it's important for all students to say what they're thinking, that's why we talk in math class. Put your hands down for just a second. I walk into a silent math class and I shudder. Because I think if people aren't talking about what they're learning, they're not learning as much. And so I think that if I need to have you talking to class, and talking in your small group is really important, but talking to the whole group is also important. So some teachers think that, and it's in some educational articles, that a system where you randomly choose kids to talk is one that makes everybody feel that they're responsible to talk, not just the people who like to talk. Because if it's the people that just like to talk, then those are the people that are going to learn the most. So that's where I'm coming from now. Talk to me about popsicle sticks and that from that point of view. Leslie.
What if you don't know the answer? You don't know, you're not thinking anything, and you're listening to say.
Yeah, and so what should you do? Like, what's the worst that can happen though?
You get embarrassed.
You're wrong. Alicia?
Yeah, I pull popsicle sticks as long as we're not like,
Sorry. Okay, so then for you there was some feeling about like it was bad if you didn't know that.
yeah.
Victor?
It's only an answer, you know. I mean, there are many things that are a lot more embarrassing than not knowing the answer. It's not really that bad at all.
All year long I've been hoping. You know, it's May and I feel like I wish I could have that longer year with you. All year long I've been hoping that having a wrong answer wouldn't be something, I would hope, I keep wanting to make wrong answers be ways we can learn.
Yeah, exactly. That's the entire point. It's a way to learn. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it's a good idea to just make yourself embarrassed or something, just so you get used to it.
Well, it's like, I think it's great if you're wrong. And I've tried to do that all year long, but I can see it's not making that much of an impact. Christine.
Well, I think most of us were brought up to believe that being wrong is like a bad thing. Like you're not supposed to be wrong. Like I mean, you're not supposed to be wrong, but I mean, like, I don't know how to explain it. It's just like you're supposed to be like smart and right and like just a mixture of embarrassment and little.
Okay, who's written me?
Yeah, like what Christine said, because you're the first math teacher I've ever had that has ever said like that it's good to be wrong because then you get more.
Well, we would
None of them ever
Do you believe me?
Yeah.
Sometimes I believe, sometimes I believe. Other times I'm like, okay, I don't know if you believe it.
Really?
Yeah.
You keep saying you're kidding.
You're like,
Well, I really believe it. I really believe that you have to be wrong. I really believe you have to make mistakes to learn stuff. You have to know, and I keep wanting you to make mistakes. And I remember way at the beginning of the year when Christine got up to the overhead and said she was confused, and I said, great, you were wondering, what's wrong with you? And because being confused, making mistakes, that's what I think. And so I keep trying to lower the pressure on you, but I also keep like I'm having problems in my classes. Not this class so much as my third period class, but I'm having problems because the same people over and over are raising their hands, and I've had that every year I've taught. I can remember students who always have their hand up, who like to talk to the class. Maybe they're future politicians, I don't know. But whatever it is, I've got to get people that don't talk to the class talking to the class. And I don't know how to do that. And then today I felt terrible because Randy, did you feel horrible today? What? Yeah. See, and I don't want you to feel horrible. I want you to feel like, gosh, you know what I would have liked Randy to say? I would have liked him to be able to say, Randy, I don't know if this is true, but he knew that 3 by 4 by 5 would give 2 3 by 4 cases, 2 3 by 5 cases, and 2 4 by 5 cases. And he was pretty confident about that. And I would like Randy to be able to say, I know that's right, but I'm not really sure why, and I didn't understand what my group was talking about. Because see, that's really important. How many people today didn't understand what my group was talking about?
How do you do that? I'm concerned with the genius if we learn from mistakes.
Does being right have to do with being smart though?
Yes.
Not being wrong, guys.
Completely.
Being wrong has to do with what? If you're wrong, wow.
I don't like popsicle sticks because the whole last year, I think I seriously remember, I only got picked like 3 times the whole year, and I had like.
I was never picked because I didn't have a stick.
Yeah. Yes. Anyone who has the last word on this right now? Sarah, you have the last word.
One last thing is that whenever we're having like discussions, like we're talking like the whole period about some little thing like the distance thing that we talked for like 3 days on. And that's much fun. I mean, if we're doing that, we can't really have popsicle sticks because because certain people have ideas about it, and other people just like sit back and look at what's happening and take it in, and some people like to be right in the middle of it, and you can't, with popsicle sticks, it kind of throws off the whole conversation.
Could you talk about what you think? I'm thinking on you now, but we talk sometimes after class and I trust your judgment. What do you think about all this?
Okay, I think that kids should have a bit of a choice whether or not they want to say something. Because when you're talking in front of a whole class, it's like everybody's looking at you and it's just about you for that moment. And so that's something that a teacher should really control.
I think last year there was so much less participation because so many people just didn't raise their hand because they knew they probably weren't going to get picked by popsicle sticks. Like, because in some conversations you only got one person to speak. Like in this one, we've had like almost the whole class talking.
Interesting, right? You have a sheet with a blue sheet of paper with these questions on it. I would like you to take a couple more minutes. If you haven't had a chance to write anything now, what I like to do before I ever have a whole class discussion or a pair discussion, I need to give individuals time to think so you actually have something to talk about. So please take time individually to reflect on some of these questions. You may not have time to get to all of them. So think about what assumptions did she hold, and then what did her students share with her that challenged those assumptions, and also anything else that really surprised you. You learned a lot about what her students think about whole class discussions. Now your students may not think exactly like them, but it's more showing the power of when you learn from their perspective. It changes how you think about engaging learners. So take some time and then we'll have a discussion about this. I'll stop you in about 2 minutes. please turn to the person sitting next to you. You don't have to go through the questions in order. You can skip around with anything that's interesting to you. But please take about a minute and a half to share a couple ideas with one person sitting next to you, and then we'll talk about it as a whole group.
And I think she also helps you
Okay, I'm going to play the role of interrupter. One idea with group work is that you stop the conversation before the conversation feels finished. That way there's actually something to talk about in front of the whole class. Sometimes what happens in group work, everybody works on the problem, figures it out together, and then when you ask to talk about it in the whole class, people are like, what? We already figured it out. So if you stop part way before you're done, there's more to talk about. So I want to record some of your thoughts about Kathy's classroom, what you noticed about her assumptions or what you learned from her students more specifically. And I'm going to record these notes up here, and I'll do that for two reasons. One, because I have a record of the conversation, and the other, it makes me stop talking if I'm actually having to type. So then I can listen to you if I'm busy. So who would like to share first? I can also just call on people, but I'd rather that you volunteer.
One of the things that we kind of talked about was like the idea of popsicle sticks. I never really thought about like students knowing that they're not going to get called on some days, because like you can only pick a certain amount of popsicle sticks in a day, and like some students were like, oh, I got called once or 3 times throughout a whole year. So I didn't think that students would realize that.
So that was interesting to you? Could anyone elaborate or add on to this idea of popsicle sticks? Maybe you thought about this or talked about this with your partner or thought about it in writing. So can we continue on this theme since it was the first one that brought up? Who would like to elaborate?
I have a question. Is it like if you pull a popsicle stick, you're out until the rest of the popsicle sticks are pulled, or do they put it back in and so you can get called again?
So there are multiple ways to implement popsicle sticks. And my impression from how the students narrated the experience was once it was pulled out, it was out, right?
Okay.
But you could also put it back in and shake it off and pull again. So that is something to consider is how you're implementing the popsicle sticks too. But in this case, if you are called on and it's out, you're like, nice, I'm done for the class period. So the implementation of the popsicle sticks is in question, right? You could manage the discussion in multiple ways using those. More adding on or elaborations related to the popsicle stick technique that was mentioned and the kids' perspectives on it, yes.
Well, I think it also depends, like, I just know from my personal experience, because I had a chemistry teacher who did popsicle sticks.
Chemistry, yeah.
And it's almost like there was like the dread of popsicle sticks, because the questions that you wanted to answer, your name never got called, or at least that's what it was like for me, kind of thing. Or it's like they would use popsicle sticks instead of fostering discussion between students, and then you had to
not
get your
as
own
natural, right?
Right. And so I don't know. So like it was, and then like the easy question, they'd be like, oh, like 2 words, and you would answer it, and I was like, okay, so that was it.
And you had more to say about a different question.
Right.
But yours wasn't pulled on.
Right.
So I want to go back to the self-determination theory constructs again. Autonomy. You want a sense of control over when to speak and what you're going to say. And if you only get told that it's your turn to speak when your popsicle stick is drawn, you've lost that autonomy a little bit, right? And then you're not able to demonstrate the competence that you have, because maybe you had competence that was very well aligned with a different question when your name is called. So that comes up here a lot. So it's useful. Any other elaborations that people would like to make related to the popsicle stick idea that came up in the video and your own experience, either as a teacher or a student?
I've had some experiences with this using it in the classroom, and I get a lot of mixed reviews, but I thought it was interesting what you said, thinking about it from another perspective, saying some students want to talk and then they can't talk. So it's not students that just are scared of talking, it's some people that are almost so motivated they always want to talk. And that it's really finding that middle ground where you have people that aren't talking, but then the people that always talk are also talking because they like to do that. So.
Yeah, so that's a dilemma too. If the same student's talking all the time, right? That's just as much of a dilemma for us as the students that we don't hear from. And so some teachers think the popsicle stick process is a way to handle that, but every time we try to resolve one dilemma, we might open up another. And learning from our students of how they process that, I think, is helpful. And the I didn't see it that way point of view is always a fun part about checking in with people. If we've exhausted this topic, we can move on, but is anyone else want to comment on the popsicle sticks before we move on to a different point in the video?
I was just gonna, like, she's mentioned something about, like, conversations being natural. Like, a lot of times in class, when someone says something, it, like, sparks a response in someone else that's, like, it could be really valuable. But if you're doing popsicle sticks, that person that, you know, got the response sparked in their head doesn't get the chance to speak because their popsicle stick's not being pulled. So you can miss out on some really valuable input.
Good point, thank you. Anything else that people want to say about this issue? Yes?
I think if you're trying to create a comfortable classroom as well, you could really instill some serious nerves in kids.
Am I going to get called on?
Yeah, I would be really nervous if I never knew when I was going to be called on or something like that, and you could just create a bad relationship with your students.
So if they don't have the autonomy to decide when they feel safe to talk, or the autonomy to decide when they're ready to extend the conversation and have a flow of the conversation that makes sense, it creates a different kind of anxiety. That's helpful. Any other points?
So, sort of on this one, but moving to a next one.
Okay.
Like, the popsicle sticks as a teacher, I never would have done if my kids hadn't had a chance to talk together or like share. And so, and I've actually, I don't think I've seen this video before, but it was surprising to me that after having a conversation, because I always assumed that if my kids had a chance to talk, whether in groups or in pairs, that would alleviate some of the pressure of being able to record out because they've had a chance to practice what they've said. And these kids were like, nope, we still don't want to talk. And the fact that it was like, I don't want to be responsible for talking for my other group members was shocking to me, because I never thought that like my kids would be nervous about talking for their people.
So did we catch that point? The teacher used this strategy of group reporter. And sometimes we think, if you're not just reporting for yourself, you're reporting for your group, it's a little safer. Because if the answer is imperfect, it's not just because I didn't my answer or my solution needs to be improved upon. It's not just a reflection of me, but it's just, no one person owns it, right? So what did the students actually think about the group reporter thing? They didn't think it was as safe, right? So what did you learn from the students? Were you surprised like Amber, or were you not? Like, what did you learn about group reporting?
But the students were very scared of like being wrong. And we actually were talking about that here in our little group discussion, that how probably the teacher didn't set an environment that allowed students to feel safe. And there was one interesting example actually in the video when Leslie, it's in page 4, the first Leslie there, she said, what if you don't know the answer and you are not thinking anything and you don't know?
I want to catch up to you. You're on page 4.
Page 4 is the first Leslie.
Right here?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So Leslie is saying, what if you are wrong, right? What if you don't know the answer? And then the teacher says something like, well, what is the worst thing that can happen? And Sammy said, get embarrassed. And then the teacher said, you are wrong. And I remember she raising her voice in the class. That would be an example, that would be like an obstacle for motivation by competence, because she's just saying what is the worst thing that can happen, and then you raise your voice when somebody say, I will feel embarrassed.
I don't think she necessarily meant like, she was saying like you're wrong to the person who was being embarrassed. I think she was actually answering her own question, like what's the worst that could happen is that you're wrong. I think just that student kind of like had an input in between that like pause.
It was kind of like a way of saying, I know, right? You'd be wrong.
Yeah.
Right. I think so.
And I think that goes back to her assumption that her students, like she thought her students would believe that their wrong answer would be valued. She thought that was something that they thought was going to be important. When really it was the case that like maybe past classes, their worry of being wrong carried over into this class. And she just assumed, well, it's May now, I've set this environment. They must think that like every single answer they have is valued, but really it wasn't the case.
Because
I guess it just goes back to her assumption that.
Yeah, challenge of teaching students in 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, and so on. They've had a long history of being math students. And so if they get an impression, like you said, from a previous class or previous experiences, that it wouldn't be okay to share your thinking. You might be judged for being wrong. And then combating that history is hard, isn't it? Yeah.
Actually, it kind of ties back to what you were saying about being surprised that they were, with what you just said. I think they're scared also of their peers going, no, that's not what we said. Because if you think about 7th graders' mindset, they are want to appease their friends and their peer groups. And so
relatedness.
Very much so. And so I think that even if, which they did say, we don't always believe you, but I think it was more an aspect of like, when doing group discussion and reporting it, they were more afraid of their peer mates saying they're wrong and not her.
Like, that's not what I thought.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the students were teaching me that if I have to talk for my group, that's scarier because I know what I think, but I might not realize what you think. And they also said, oh, sorry, I won't get ahead of myself. You can tell me what they said. But, right, so it was scarier to represent someone else's thinking in some cases, not safer, because they didn't want to offend somebody for representing their thinking correctly.
And they didn't want their friends to get, like, they wanted them to like them. So if they got it wrong, it's like, oh, they don't like me anymore because they just yelled at me, and now I'm embarrassed and the whole thing. Because like I said, some 7th grade mindset.
Yeah, of course. Or human mindset.
Right,
really.
that too.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
It's this case where reporting for your group has autonomy and competence and relatedness all wrapped up. I don't have autonomy because I don't have control. I can't just say what I think. Someone else told me that I have to say what everyone thinks. Competence, I'm not sure that I'm representing your thinking right. Relatedness, I don't want to offend you by representing your thinking incorrectly. It's a pretty fascinating dynamic that I hadn't quite thought about. Other comments about group reporting, setting an environment to feel safe, surprises you might have gained from listening to these students' points of view. Comments about that. Or anything you've written down you feel like we haven't talked about yet.
I was just going to say, I mean, what would be a solution for that? To not have a recorder, but what would be something, because we still, I mean, I think group work is valuable, but what is the best way to share and discuss in that sense, I guess, in your opinion?
So I'm not wanting to position myself as having all of the answers, but I can give you one way to think about it, right? So I think one strategy is to change it up, because any way that you address one dilemma can open up new dilemmas. So I'm going to use popsicle sticks to make sure the distribution of the conversation happens. Oh, but that's a problem, so I can't do that all the time. Then I'm going to do the group reporting. Oh, that's a problem, I can't do that. So maybe try group reporting for a while and have an explicit conversation about why you're doing it, and then shift. And maybe now I'm not going to have group reporting. You're going to talk on behalf of your own thinking, but your thinking was developing in the group. So I wouldn't say that there's a silver bullet, that this is the thing that's going to address it, but I think that variety makes a difference, because as you change it up, you're going to meet certain people's needs at different points. But I also think being really explicit about why you're doing what you're doing, providing lots of reasons, providing lots of rationales. In this video, Kathy spent a lot of time saying, I'm doing this because I think the more you talk, the more you learn, and I really want you to be able to learn. She gives reasons all the time, and she doesn't just do that in this video, she does it throughout all of her videos. And I think if students can understand where you're coming from a little more, I think you can negotiate that understanding and kind of meet in the middle. So I think it's not just what you do, but providing the rationales for why you do it, and the variety and the change. And you're not gonna have Kathy's kids. So, right, so what Kathy might do to adjust to meet her group's needs, some people in your class might think group reporting's fine. So checking in with the students about how that experience works for them or not makes a huge difference too. So those are some of my responses.
Something we talked about, I think you might have mentioned it in our group, is like when you, as a teacher, when you're doing group work, you walk around and like check what each group's doing. And if you see something that's really valuable that needs to be shared with the class, then you can, let that student know, are you comfortable sharing this with the class? Can you share this when we come back to the big group? And that's really helpful just so they can get their response, set up in their mind so they're not just speaking out and like get jumbled or whatever.
So you're letting students know ahead of time, hey, this is important. I think I want to call on you. And they can kind of like get the plan in mind. This is related to the selecting and sequencing idea. If you've read about the 5 practices, it's kind of letting the student know that they're being selected, right? Why not? Why not let someone know that you might call on them if you've strategically chosen that response?
In a way, didn't she do that? She told them who was going to be talking.
They knew who the group reporters were, right?
Right.
And then she rolled a dice, and the dice referred to the number for each group. So I think Randy knew he was the group reporter, but Randy didn't know his group would be called on first. Yeah. There are so many things to talk about in this video, and I want to honor your time, so I want to wrap up the conversation that I've been having with you today by going on to a few more things just to close it up. To model closure. So why did I have you think about these issues? I think that it's important to try to get to know where our students are coming from. We could be surprised. We could get ideas from them about how to improve the environment for them so they will engage more and get more out of learning math. But it can also, I would acknowledge this can also be overwhelming. We have a lot of things to do when we're teaching. And the idea that we have to psychoanalyze each of our students, that's not what I'm saying, like that's too much. It's something you do gradually, you fit it in once in a while. I'm trying to say that if you do this once in a while, it's better than never doing it at all. But you can't do it every day. Like Kathy can't have a conversation like this every day or else she's not teaching them math, right? So sometimes, don't feel like you have to do this all the time, just do it sometimes rather than never. And learners change all the time. So what works for me today, keep me involved in the conversation, might not work for me tomorrow. So there's no one answer, right? So everybody's changing all of the time. And just the idea that I was mentioning before, that motivation is a state of being, not a trait of a person. I might look like a really motivated and engaged person today, but then I might get in a car accident and I might be so upset and distracted that I won't be able to engage later. But it won't be because I don't care, it's because there's things going on in my life, right? But if you just saw me in that moment, it might look like I don't care. So it's a state of being depending on what's going on in our lives, how the mathematical tasks seem interesting to me, all of these things. So I have a homework assignment. Not like I work here, it's not like I can collect this from you and grade it. But if you want to share your responses with me, I can share you my email with you. But one way that you can think about this, if you don't have time for a whole class discussion with your learners, you can get learners to write reflection. You can get your students to write reflections. And so one idea that I had for people is that you can think for yourself, what assumptions am I carrying around about my students? Maybe it might be like in my case, it was an assumption of why they didn't do their homework. I assumed that my students didn't do their homework because they didn't try and they were too busy. And then I checked in with my students and I was wrong. Kathy had an assumption about her students that group reporting would feel safe. And then she checked in with her students and it wasn't quite the case. Identifying what assumptions we have about our students is not easy, but if you think you have one, you can check in with them and have them write to you. Think about a specific incident and then ask them for feedback. And so this is a little homework assignment where you can think about if I was to check in with my learners when I'm student teaching or when I'm teaching a lesson and there's an assumption I have with them, it's a prompting process to help you think about that. So I want to leave you with a few things. Students' motivation engagement is dynamic, changing, and at least partially dependent on what is happening in the moment. And so that's overwhelming because people's motivation is changing all the time. But the fact that motivation is changing all the time and is impacted by the situation means we can actually impact that. We can actually motivate the learners. We can change the context for them so it feels safer, so it feels like a space where they feel more invited. So if motivation is dynamic, we can have some influence on it. And students' voices can then challenge our assumptions about what it means to learn math and engage productively if we try to see the world from their eyes. So going forward, I want you to think about things that you can ask your learners to try to learn about what it's like to be a student in your classroom, and think about what assumptions about your learners that you can examine. So thanks. And if you want to do the homework assignment, I'll give you my email address. And if you have questions as you think about, do I want to examine this assumption? Is this assumption I want to think about? You can email me and I'll talk to you more about it. And that's my email address. My last name is jansen@udel.edu. So your homework assignment is due Thursday. Thanks for coming. It's nice to spend time with you. Thank you.